at 227.2 pounds. He holds a near-perfect professional record of 10 victories, opposite just 1 defeat, with 7 of those wins coming by way of...
It's just wild to see after how that first round went.
Nice left hook.
Front of the right hand. Do not slip to your left on the jab.
It's just a matter of time. He's getting broke down.
Whoa.
That's a good hook he landed on. Oh.
Overhand right.
A minute 15 seconds away from the midpoint of this fight, and now Davis trying to walk.
The 2025 fight between Jake Paul and Gervonta Davis was pure chaos from the first bell. The undefeated knockout star faced off against the YouTube sensation, and what happened in the ring was intense, shocking, and impossible to forget. Did Jake Paul achieve the unthinkable, or did Tank Davis dominate him in the most violent way? On paper, this matchup seemed outrageous. A cruiserweight weighing over 200 pounds squaring off against a lightweight champion known for his dominance at 135 pounds. The size gap alone made Atlanta regulators hesitate to approve the fight. They didn't want the risk, but boxing rarely follows logic. It thrives on spectacle. That's why the fight was relocated to Miami's Casa Center, a city built for drama and excitement. What we witnessed wasn't just a boxing match. It was one of the most lopsided showdowns in recent history turned into a global spectacle. Netflix spotted the chance, stepped in, and promoted it like the Super Bowl of combat sports. And it paid off. Millions around the world watched, not just to see punches land, but to see what happens when a YouTuber turned fighter faces one of boxing's most feared knockout stars. This fight wasn't about belts or rankings. It was about making history. The weight difference wasn't just a talking point, it was a major factor. Jake Paul, the troublemaker, had a frame that overshadowed Tank Davis. Taller, heavier, with longer reach. On paper, it looked like David versus Goliath. But the twist? Goliath wasn't the natural fighter. Jake Paul was the outsider, the disruptor, the wild card who earned his fame by knocking out fighters the boxing world often ignored. Gervonta Davis, on the other hand, was David packed with power. 24 wins, 23 by knockout, undefeated, and feared across multiple divisions. This fight wasn't about fairness. It was about what happens when hype meets pure skill. And it didn't appear overnight. The groundwork was laid years ago, with trash talk fueling the fire, going back to 4 years earlier when Jake Paul boldly called out Canelo Alvarez, a move that made most people laugh. That's when Gervonta Davis jumped in, famously claiming he'd beat the brakes off Jake Paul. It started as a quick social media jab, but Jake, being Jake, didn't let it slide. He mocked Davis's height, turned him into a punchline, and used his massive online following to turn the insult into promotion. From there, things escalated. Tank dismissed Paul as not a real boxer, the same criticism Paul had faced since the beginning, but he leaned into it. Every insult and every slight became fuel. The more the boxing world said no, the louder his fans said yes. And the louder the fans got, the more pressure there was on fighters like Davis to step into the ring and prove him wrong. The rivalry intensified after Jake Paul shocked everyone by defeating Mike Tyson. What made it so captivating was how different the two fighters were. Jake Paul, brash and loud, always selling a fight like it was a Hollywood blockbuster, while Tank Davis stayed quiet, cold, and let his fists do all the talking. When Tank said he'd put Paul to sleep, he wasn't joking. It was a promise backed by a record of nearly knocking out every opponent he faced. That's why the fight became unavoidable. It wasn't just two boxers in the ring, it was two worlds crashing together. Jake Paul, boxing's most watched disruptor, going up against a pound-for-pound star who had nothing to prove but everything to lose if he let a YouTuber get the upper hand. The weight difference, the trash talk, the Tyson fight, it all built a pressure cooker. By the time fight night arrived, the world wasn't just watching, it was holding its breath. And that's how a fight that should never have happened became reality. Jake Paul's rise in boxing has been extraordinary. He started as a YouTube prankster making crazy videos for clicks, and somehow ended up in the ring with one of the most feared names in combat sports history, Mike Tyson, and not just fighting him, actually winning. Now, was Tyson 58 at the time? Yes. Did he look like the Iron Mike who used to end heavyweights' careers? Definitely not. But even so, beating Tyson even in his later years, gave Jake Paul a huge boost. He turned what could have been seen as a gimmick into what he called the defining win of his career. Critics weren't impressed. They called the Tyson fight a robbery, saying he looked old and tired and shouldn't have faced a young, powerful fighter like Jake. Eddie Hearn even labeled the event an insult. Yet, love it or hate it, nobody could stop talking about it. And Jake knew exactly how to use it. To him, the win wasn't about Tyson's age, It was about defeating a legend, grabbing headlines, and cementing his place in boxing history. The reaction was pure chaos. Colby Covington fired words at him, saying Jake looked soft and wasn't a real boxer. Claressa Shields, one of the most decorated fighters alive, mocked his style, calling it nothing but chaos and hustle. Francis Ngannou, the MMA heavyweight powerhouse, even joked about slapping Jake around just to humble him. And Andre Ward, a retired legend, basically told Jake, "Fight a real contender if you want to prove yourself." Everyone had an opinion, everyone had a hot take. But Jake flipped the script. Instead of letting criticism weigh him down, he turned it into fuel. Every insult became a headline. Every tweet turned into material for his next promo. Suddenly, Jake Paul wasn't just a YouTuber messing around in boxing. He became a name real champions had to respect. Love him or hate him, he sparked conversations the sport hadn't seen in years. On the other side of the ring was a man who didn't need tricks, clickbait, or trash talk to make his mark, Gervonta "Tank" Davis. If Jake brought noise and chaos, Tank was the quiet storm. His fists did all the talking. Before facing Paul, Tank's record was flawless. 24 wins, 0 losses, and 23 knockouts. That wasn't just dominance, it was destruction. Almost everyone who stepped into the ring with him ended up unconscious or broken. He didn't fight to win rounds, he fought to end nights early. Tank's journey was built on grit. Born in Baltimore and raised in a tough environment, boxing was more than a sport for him, it was survival. By the time he turned professional, he brought that raw hunger into every fight. What set him apart even more was how he became Atlanta's adopted son. The city embraced him, and Tank delivered highlight after highlight, knockout after knockout, turning into a cult hero in the sport. And it wasn't just his record, it was how he won. He wasn't a volume puncher, constantly throwing jabs. Tank waited, calculated, and then exploded. One clean shot and it was lights out. That kind of power at 135 pounds is terrifying. Fans didn't just respect him, they feared anyone who stepped across the ring from him. That's why, going into this fight, most of the boxing world believed Jake Paul was finally walking into a trap he couldn't escape. Sure, Jake had beaten names like Woodley, Anderson Silva, Nate Diaz, and even Tyson. But Tank wasn't an aging MMA star or a retired legend. Tank was in his prime, undefeated, ruthless, with a knockout rate over 95%. Those numbers don't lie. That's why so many thought Paul's streak was about to end brutally. No YouTube fame, no Netflix hype, no size advantage was going to save him once Tank's fists landed. This was supposed to be the fight that humbled him. The fight that reminded everyone that boxing is still about skill, timing, and pure talent, not marketing or promotion. The contrast between the two fighters couldn't have been clearer. Jake Paul, the loud disruptor with millions of followers, selling fights like blockbuster movies. Gervonta Davis, the silent assassin, earning a fan base through respect and fear. One thrived on promotion, the other on pure destruction. Put them in the same ring and it wasn't just a fight, it was a storm the entire sports world couldn't ignore. That's why this matchup mattered. It wasn't just hype versus skill or size versus speed. It was everything boxing fans debate about, all in one fight. Legacy versus clout, tradition versus disruption, respect versus chaos. By the time fight night arrived, no one cared about the weight difference or whether Jake was a real boxer. All that mattered was one question. Could Jake Paul survive Tank Davis's fists, or was he about to join the long list of fighters sent to an early, brutal defeat? The stakes were enormous, and the answer, as the world would soon find out, was even more shocking than anyone imagined. Fight week in Miami wasn't just a build-up. Miami turned into total chaos. The city felt like a big show with Netflix pushing the fight like a hit TV event. Giant billboards and countdown clocks were everywhere, and reporters swarmed both camps like vultures. Press conferences felt more like a circus than sport. Jake played the villain and taunted Tank by crouching and making fun of his height while laughing in his face. Tank did not react with noise. He stared straight at Jake and said one clear thing. "I am putting you in a body bag." The crowd gasped and the headlines wrote themselves. Every face-off was explosive, with the two standing nose to chest, though Tank barely reached Jake's chin. The tension was electric. Jake thrived on it, throwing insults, clowning around, and feeding the media frenzy. Now, the only question isn't whether Jake Paul will fight again, it's who's bold enough to step up next. Like this video and hit subscribe for more updates.